Event freelancers, welcome to your new community, connecting you to your next project. Get connected. Sign up now. It's free.
So we've just heard last week the news that the events industry can open and return to business again, which is great, albeit with stringent regulations. To help focus on this and much more, I'd like to welcome Simon Hughes, Chair of the Business Visits and Events Partnership, to deliver the keynote.
Very good. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, AJ. Lovely to see you again. Rehearsal is important, of course, because this is a real pleasure for me to be here at the Event Freelancer Summit. And in a very career working in the creative communications industry for nearly 40 years now, it's the first time I've ever done a virtual keynote. So fingers crossed that it all goes well. I'm not so much worried about the technology, by the way. I'm worried about the fact that I've got all of my kit on an ironing board in my bedroom. I'll send a picture later. In case you think I'm making that up. Listen, I'm no stranger to summits either, as I worked for 10 years at the COI, the UK government's marketing communications agency, as the director of live events. And one of the challenges of that job was the requests made by both officials and politicians were often very demanding in terms of risk, resource and timing. Yet when my office phone rang, my default response often had to be yes, no matter how challenging the task would be. And a classic example would be the call I took from the head of events at 10 Downing Street late in November 2008. A G20 finance meeting had been held in Washington earlier that month to discuss the parlous state of the financial markets and the world economy. Gordon Brown, the then Prime Minister, had decided that the situation was so drastic that another summit was required in London at the beginning of April 2009. I did the sums. With the Christmas and New Year break, we had only 14 working weeks to prepare the G20 London Summit. This was going to be really challenging. Now, we're really privileged here in the UK that we have such a world-class event industry. And when push comes to shove, we have the creative and technical expertise that can deliver global events of the highest caliber. We had to throw a lot of that at the project to get the G20 London Summit organised in time. And I remember checking in at Excel a couple of days before the summit and looking at the list of the many contractors and freelancers working on site. And it was like a reunion of everyone I knew in the business. As I wandered around inspecting all the different areas involved in the build, I was constantly stopping to chat with people that had worked on other projects that I'd been involved with. From production managers to show callers, graphic and set designers to audio and lighting teams, logistics managers to outside broadcast engineers, the cast list of expert help on hand seemed endless. Now, my point is, the UK event industry relies on the freelance talent that helps make it one of the most dynamic, creative and growing sectors in the visitor economy. UK events of all types provide skilled jobs, cultural appreciation and knowledge exchange. Events create significant levels of both direct and indirect spend and contribute a high level of exports around the globe. We have an international reputation for excellence and world-class businesses that drive our industry forward. And so much of that is supported by the freelance community that we have gathered here online today. Now, we work from a base that BVEP research has shown provides over 700,000 jobs to a diverse and highly skilled UK-based workforce. We help generate direct spend of over 70 billion. Business events alone facilitate in excess of 165 billion in trade. We have a great international reputation for being one of the most creative and experienced group of professionals in the world. But as true as all this may be, where are we now? Last week, as Steve mentioned earlier, we finally got a go date of October the 1st for conference and exhibition activity. 2 weeks before that, we had a green light for the outdoor sector, although that was far too late for practically all of the 2020 festival programs. Meetings of up to 30 people are now allowed in permitted premises. We help secure places on the key working groups that have produced the overall guidance for events to be COVID-19 safe, and via our partners contributed to the specific guidance for outdoor exhibitions, conferences and meetings. Since the lockdown, we've worked across the industry with our partners, running surveys, getting insights to inform policy and producing evidence of the scale and impact that the industry has faced. We've pushed back as hard as possible where fiscal measures taken by the government have not helped or proved to be too onerous in terms of future liabilities. The real hardship faced by nearly 3 million people here in the UK that either work as freelancers on short-term contracts or are limited company owners that cannot access help is growing week by week. And that's why the BVEP has been very clear and called specifically for action to be taken to provide support for the freelance community and the many SMEs that make up our industry. We now have quite a lot of heavy lifting to do to get ready for the restart. First, there are dozens of questions and clarifications around the published guidance that will need to be sorted out and communicated effectively. Then we have to get through the various pilot events that have also been promised. Many bits of the extended ecosystem that we operate in are already back in action, partly, I suspect, to help encourage people to normalise to the new way of living with the continuing threat of coronavirus. But have you noticed that since both hospitality and retail have restarted, we've been hearing more and more about job losses, with big name brands shedding staff or closing down outlets. I'm afraid to say that the events industry will not be immune from this kind of reduction, and the malign impact of COVID-19 as a massive disruptor to our world will see business failures and job losses. So what does this mean right now? The paramount concern in the short term has to be survival, because without that, there'll be no recovery for the event industry. When you hear serial entrepreneurs like Luke Johnson talking about how worried he is that London will fail because there are not enough confident customers coming into town, then the need to get close to our customers and reassure them that our world is as safe and secure as possible will be critical. We also need to find out what their own concerns and priorities are so that we can work with them to align with their needs. Collaboration will become the default setting more than ever before in our industry, as we will have to re-examine many of the standard approaches that we used to take and adjust in the light of new protocols and procedures. Now, the other critical part of the recovery phase will be looking at the lessons that we've learned as a result of the chaos this pandemic has created. I think that many of us felt that we slipped through the cracks when lockdown was imposed on everyone. We've also learned that it is much easier to lock the economy down than it is to start it up again. Given that we all understand both the power and economic impact that professionally produced events can deliver, as well as the many other benefits that can extend through event legacy, I think there needs to be much more emphasis given to the role that events of all types can play in creating opportunities for growth, employment, and regeneration. Look at Joe Anderson, Mayor of Liverpool. Only last week, he was calling for business events and conferences to be restarted in his city, where they form a major part of its £3.3 billion visitor economy. It's that visitor economy that supports 38,000 jobs in Liverpool and some 50,000 across the city region. The skills and talents that we have need to be more clearly recognised and appreciated. And that's why I'm so pleased that underpinning all the guidance that has been produced is the concept of each and every event undergoing a rigorous risk assessment and risk management assessment. We're really good at this in the event industry, where the oversight and regulation of health and safety issues has meant much more responsibility has been devolved to the businesses organising and hosting events. So ensuring that our events are safe, adhering to best practice, and following well-established health and safety protocols in order to manage risks for both people working on events and attending them is obviously second nature to us. In recent years, we've unfortunately also had to consider safety from a security point of view. We have world-leading practitioners in our industry when it comes to crowd control, major event planning, and security. So asking us to follow guidance to create biosecure events with new levels of cleanliness and hygiene for our guests is not an onerous request. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one to think that it's ironic that our expertise in this area has perhaps not been fully recognised by the government. After all, they themselves had identified a global pandemic as a significant threat in their own national risk register. Just how ready were they? Did they have the right response and resources in place? Or did they fail to act on their own risk assessment? When we consider the length of time that's taken for events to start stuttering back into business, this kind of observation becomes less ironic and much more fundamental in my view. When the PM announced the start date last week here in the UK and the main guidance for the visitor economy was then published, there was a curious bullet point in the covering email that officials shared with us. I'm going to quote it in full. From October the 1st, it's expected that events of all types, e.g. trade shows, consumer shows, exhibitions and conferences, will be allowed at a capacity allowing for compliance with social distancing of 2 meters or 1 meter with mitigation. Where such events involve people speaking loudly for prolonged periods of time, any mitigation must include particular attention to the ventilation of the spaces. This will be subject to the latest public health advice. Now, perhaps I'm just a bit too cynical, but that last sentence has given me real pause for thought. As we watched other sectors get the green light, many of us in the event industry simply couldn't understand why we were being held back and having to wait so long. Surely, if the government really understood our abilities and the immediate economic impact that we could start to bring to bear, we'd be ahead of bingo halls and hairdressers in the queue. In fact, as the Joint Meetings Industry Council started to put a global manifesto together to show how vital business events will be in kickstarting the world economy, someone came up with a great line. Events don't need to be in the long queue for handouts like lots of other sectors. We should be in the much shorter queue of those ready and able to help out. So that odd line about people speaking loudly and the reference to ventilation made me think. I know that many people are still very cautious about returning to work and whatever the new normal actually looks and feels like. But having been assured by the ministers and officials that we've done everything possible to make our case, we still don't really know for certain why events have had to wait so long. Did we get caught out by some odd scientific or medical concern over the possible spread of the disease in venues with large groups of people sharing the same space? Is there a problem with air conditioning that enables the virus to spread that we're unaware of? We have, of course, seen outbreaks in abattoirs where the cold operation areas have been cited as perhaps being an enabler for these very localized spikes. But all of that ignores the very thorough facility management plans every decent venue I've ever come across has in place. We already know about air movement and heating control, spend significant amounts of money ensuring we meet a wide range of regulated standards for plant and machinery operation on our premises, and follow regular maintenance schedules, employing specialist contractors to support such work as required. I'd suggest that the top end of our venue offering and across the piece, these practices and safety regimes are as good as those you'd find in any hospital or care home. So we can manage people speaking loudly for a prolonged period of time. Thank you very much. We give them a microphone and we'll turn the ventilation on to maximum. But I'd really like to know what the problem was that held us back so long. In the end, it comes down to risk assessment and the balance that needs to be struck between the health impacts of the virus and those of economic lockdown. Survival will be challenging. Recovery will take perhaps more time than we'd like. The major festival owners have all written off 2020, but what will 2021 look like for them if we're still having to social distance? So the last bit of the where are we now question is that we need to ensure that our contribution to both cultural and economic life, the experiences that we create, and the sharing of knowledge that our collaborative and innovative events enable is clearly understood by all our key stakeholders. And that's why I've offered up the BVEP to help support a One Voice campaign in the lead up to the October restart. A really great aspect of the disaster that's fallen on us all is the way people from across the industry have pulled together. So credit to all of them involved in this initiative, particularly Rick Staten from Smile and Martin Fullard from Mash Media, who's joining a session in the summit later on today, in fact. So stay alert for more news on the One Voice campaign, as we will need everyone involved in the event industry to promote it across every single channel we can utilize. I hope this has given you a clear view of where we are now. And it's my very great pleasure to invite Michael Worley-Birch from TRO to join me to take a look at what happens next for the event industry. Thanks for having me here this morning, and I'm really looking forward to enjoying the rest of the Event Freelancer Summit. Thank you.
Event freelancers, welcome to your new community, connecting you to your next project. Get connected. Sign up now. It's free.